Beleaguered EdTech major BYJU'S. Finally, some good news. Bear in mind, BYJU'S has a debt pile of over $1 billion, $1.2 billion. And now the latest we understand is that Ranjan Pai, the billionaire, has offered to take over 1,400 crore rupees in NCDs or non-convertible debentures, as in BYJU'S debt worth 1,400 crore rupees. And in exchange for that, Ranjan Pai will get one board seat himself and will be able to nominate two more. So that means Ranjan Pai gets 3 board seats in return for 1,400 crore rupees, isn't it, Kartik?
Absolutely, Krishna. But I think, the $1.2 billion of outstanding loan that BYJU'S still has on its books is a slightly different story.
Yeah.
That loan was taken in the year 2021 when BYJU'S was on this major acquisition drive and used that money to buy as many as 9 companies. Those 9 companies also included Epic and Great Learning, both of which are on sale right now to repay that loan that it had taken up. So no real development ever since last week on that front, except that perhaps the Epic platform may get sold for a little, not a little, in fact about $100 million lower than what it was bought for. But that's for another day. I think what we are focusing on today
is about, put that into perspective, Kartik is absolutely right, that $1.2 billion loan is what BYJU'S, and it's selling its own units that it bought. But this entire takeover of 1,400 crore rupees worth of debt by Ranjan Pai has got to do with its test prep platform called Aakash, isn't it, Kartik?
Absolutely. So here comes in Davidson Kempner Capital.
Yes.
This US, New York-based investment firm had actually vowed to lend 2,000 crore rupees or $250 million to BYJU'S to go ahead and acquire that stake in Akash. Now, that transaction was to happen in the month of May this year. Now, what really happened was May is the time when this negative news inflow for BYJU'S started coming. So, out of that 2,000 crores that was to be pledged, to be paid to BYJU'S, lent to BYJU'S, only 800 crore rupees was actually given by Davidson Kempner to BYJU'S. Now, the balance 1,200 crore rupees never made it to BYJU'S. But what has Ranjan Pai really bought that 800 crore rupees of loan worth for? 1,400 crore rupees. Now, 800 crore rupees is the loan amount. The balance 600 crore rupees is actually the interest which has been paid to Davidson Kempner. So, 1,400 crore rupees divided 800 crore rupees as loan which has been bought, and 600 crore rupees of interest on that loan which has already been paid. Now, this, of course, for Ranjan Pai, I think a little expensive valuation, because when this loan was taken, I think the loan was still taken at a flat valuation of about $22 billion. Today, BYJU'S valuation is much lower, as we know. Now, what does this get Ranjan Pai in return? Of course, it gets Ranjan Pai a good 15 to 20% stake in Aakash, and that Aakash holding, in addition to other investments made by Manipal, could eventually take it up to maybe in excess of about 25 to 30% or so if Ranjan Pai and Manipal Group decides to invest more in BYJU'S. Right now, the Chaudhary family owns about 30% in BYJU'S. The balance 70% is held by Baiju Ravindran and his family alone. Now, Aakash is, of course, this great tuition institute which was acquired by BYJU'S and has been slated as the upcoming IPO from the stable of Baiju Ravindran. And that IPO is likely to be worth 8,000 crore rupees or so. So, at 8,000 crore rupees IPO, about 30% or so with Ranjan Pai, still a valuation far ahead of what 1,400 crore rupees or so has been paid by him thus far. So that's the latest development on the BYJU'S front. At least for now, the loan that this New York-based Davidson Kempner had given BYJU'S has been offset. No further litigation, no further renegotiation of terms of repayment of that loan or the interest. That chapter for Baiju Ravindran, for the EdTech major BYJU'S, is over, signed, sealed, dusted, done away with. Now, I think the bigger challenges of the $1.2 billion loan, which still has to be, paid for, is something that BYJU'S will have to fight tooth and nail to.
Not much has moved as far as that big number, $1.2 billion, are concerned. But Kartik, any positive development for a group like BYJU'S at this stage, if it gets any kind of money flowing into it, it's got to have ripple effect on other things as well.
It would. I think for one, definitely investor confidence, any fresh capital that BYJU'S wants to go out there and seek to infuse further funding to run its operations. Of course, I think it's a little green signal. It's a glimmer of hope. Beyond that, I think, a lot of mystery still lies locked away in the FY23 financial statements, which have not yet been audited and opened up for any sort of scrutiny.
True.
So FY22 numbers came out earlier this month, I think in the first week of November, and we saw revenues go about 2.3x of what they were in FY21. But FY23 is an all-new story. In fact, FY22 we also saw losses narrow.
Right.
But I think all the acquisitions that were made in 21, 22 and the loan and how that loan was utilized and everything else around this decline of edtech as a learning industry, as a platform, and the students returning back to regular school, physical school, ditching edtech platforms, not just BYJU'S but all edtech platforms across the board. All those are going to get revealed in the revenue growth or degrowth in FY23, and if there is a degrowth and those humongous costs already on the books, then I think losses would widen even further.
Okay, I have only one question to ask. It seems like, at the end of the day, all pies are coming to BYJU'S rescue. First, you had Mohandas Pai being put on the new governance council at BYJU'S, and then you have Ranjan Pai, both from Manipal, associated with Manipal. Interesting, isn't it? Now, Manipal Global Education as an educational institute, has gained such reputation in the last decade or two. And now you have both of these gentlemen actively involved in the next phase of education going forward, and that's online education.
So to me, Krishna, it seems, we know Mohandas Pai and Manipal Group were in fact among the earliest investors into BYJU'S.
Right.
And this is before Chang Investments had come in, and this is before Chang Zuckerberg, this is before Sequoia had come in, which then exited, and before, all the top VC funds across the world, before they had really bet heavily on the edtech space and BYJU'S in particular. And all those bets actually started coming in only around 2018, 2019, and then the pandemic 2020 onwards saw valuations really soar on account of this rapid funding that BYJU'S received. But I think Manipal Group, Mohandas Pai in particular, they've been early stage investors in BYJU'S. I think they invested in the fundamental core of the founder, entrepreneur, of the sector, of what was trying to get built out of Bangalore, out of India. And those early bets, I think, have not yet been dissolved. So I feel while every other investor saw this rabbit opportunity to enter at a time when the industry was booming, in any case, make a quick buck and exit. I think some of them did make the quick buck at the $22 billion valuation, but many of them pretty much jumped ship as they saw valuation tank.
Right.
But Manipal Group, Mohandas Pai in particular, I think they have been early stage investors and continue to invest and continue to stay invested in the BYJU'S story, perhaps not as much in the edtech story, also with the upcoming Aakash IPO. So I think it's a good time for the investors who have held on to pick up some stake in Akash. Akash, remember, continues to be the only profitable business for BYJU'S, at least from as far as the last data was filed, the financial reports were filed. So I think it's fairly clear that there is some upside that existing investors are seeing in the Akash IPO, and they don't want to take a knee-jerk reaction right now on dwindling valuations and the negative news on BYJU'S emerging every week, every day almost, and are holding fort to look at perhaps some upside with Aakash IPO.
Right. Interestingly, Aakash Chaudhary now, after this deal, returns as the CEO. The promoter family is Aakash Chaudhary. So that's interesting move. So you're getting somebody from the promoter family to lead Aakash all over again. That's another strategic move.
So I think, again, Krishna, it really makes eminent strategic sense, because here you
They set up the business.
They set up the business. They made it profitable. They sold it at a great valuation to BYJU'S. There is no reason, there was no flaw in the business model.
Right.
They sold it only to get a nice upside to what they had built.
Yep.
So there is absolute no logic in replacing them and getting maybe BYJU Ravindran himself to run Akash as CEO.
Yeah.
Because we've seen what BYJU Ravindran unwittingly, I'm sure, unwillingly, I'm sure, has done to the other group companies held by Think and Learn Private Limited.
Questions on whether he should be CEO of BYJU'S in the first place.
So there are questions on his reputation, questions on his own sustenance, questions on what he has brought to the table and what he has taken away from the table are rampant questions. So at a time like that, the only profitable business, one which is slated for an IPO, to not be run by somebody who's brought it to that level is absolutely ironic.
Absolutely ironic. Here's hoping that BYJU'S finds its way forward with the original investors still holding fort. Bear in mind, we just saw in the US last week what happened to the first investor into WeWork. The first investor who handed out a $47 billion check to Adam Neumann, the founder of WeWork. And just last week, WeWork filed for bankruptcy. And the company that invested, and the man who invested, Masayoshi Son of SoftBank, saw SoftBank post quarterly losses of over $5 billion. That's another story. We're hoping that BYJU'S will not be a repeat of WeWork.